Have you always wondered what you should have learned in health class, or maybe what your kids are missing in health class and what you need to teach them at home? Well, watch this Instagram Live and find out just that. Hi, my name's Laura, and on this channel, I will be helping you find optimal health through knowledge and movement.
Hello, hello. I believe we are live. Sorry, everything's like a little chaotic today, because I was in the office until like an hour ago. So I had to like rush home and get everything sorted. Let's give it a couple minutes, see what's happening. Let me pull up my notes. I'm sorry, I'm usually much more together than this. Also, I know that my AC is loud, but it's so hot in here. All right, our guest will be here momentarily.
Hello.
Hello. Hi, how are you?
Good. How are you doing?
I am good. Thanks for being here.
Yes, thank you.
My AC is on and I know it's very loud.
I can hear you just fine.
Okay, good. I was at the office for most of the day, and so my AC was off, so I got home like a couple minutes ago, and so I just like need the room to cool down for a little bit.
That's okay.
It's been a little bit of a
No worries.
How are you?
Good. I'm doing very well.
Good. Glad to hear. Where are you coming live from?
So I'm in Rochester, Minnesota, and I am right now in my guest bedroom / office / video shooting room. So my kind of jack of all trades. I made it my video room. So I have like my chairs out of the way, and I have like a bunch of lights kind of in the corner right now. So yes,
making the most of your space.
Exactly. Totally.
Amazing. Well, so I'm in New York. I was in the office today in Queens, and I live in Brooklyn.
Cool.
So yeah, we're here.
Yeah, I have a friend that lives in Brooklyn. I'm not sure exactly where, but I have a good friend that's there. So I wish I could come visit, but apparently Minnesota was just put on like if you come visit here or whatever, you have to quarantine and all of that jazz. And so she was supposed to be here next week, and I was maybe going to get to see her for a day, and I was so bummed. So yes, so I think it's very cool that you're out there, but yes, I do know it is very hot because I have heard from her.
It's like 90 degrees and like so humid, and whew. I love the heat personally, but it's just like it's a lot.
Yes.
All right, so let's jump into it.
Sounds great.
Can you introduce yourself to our audience?
Yes, definitely. So my name is Laura. I am a pelvic floor physical therapist, and all that means is I went to get my doctoral degree in physical therapy. And once I received that, I went on to get further education on how to treat and care for individuals who have pelvic floor dysfunction. And pelvic floor dysfunction tends to be urinary incontinence, constipation, fecal incontinence, pelvic organ prolapse, where your pelvic organs want to kind of come on out of your body. You can have pelvic pain, hip pain, back pain, abdominal pain, pain with intercourse, you can have, let's see, and sexual dysfunction can be a huge thing on there. So the pelvic floor has all of these different functions. It's super, super important. And so I've gone and dedicated almost the last 10 years to completely treating the pelvic floor. And in addition to that, I also have a background in yoga. So I have my 200-hour yoga teacher training certification. And then for the last like 2 to 3 years, I have become very involved in the treatment and care of the transgender population, supporting them as they go through specifically surgery, bottom surgery, so transitioning with genital reconstruction. So that is my kind of areas of expertise.
Wow, that's a lot.
Yes.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And so for anyone coming in on your end, I'm Jamie.
Yeah.
I'm a health educator with ACQC, the AIDS Center of Queens County. And in normal, non-pandemic times, I teach HIV prevention to high schoolers across Queens. Well, the curriculum is focused on HIV prevention. We also do like pregnancy prevention, condom use, healthy relationships, stuff like that.
I love that. I love that. So I actually have always been very inspired by social media, and I used to work for a major medical institution in southeastern Minnesota, and I left in January with this mission to get more information out there about the pelvic floor on social media, because they had always been very buttoned up about it, and I felt like there was this disparity in information getting to individuals, and I didn't understand, why are we so tight-lipped about all of this info that we could produce and give to people for free, and then the people who still need us can come in and get our skilled care, but there's a lot of stuff that I could give out for free. Like I have just on my feed today, I broke down what are the 4 major types of incontinence. And that's a simple, free infographic that wasn't a big deal to put out there, but will literally remedy so many people's lives, help with incontinence, easy peasy. And I just love the way social media can do that. And I was very inspired by my nieces, who my oldest niece is 24 and I'm 35. And then my second oldest niece is 22. And I've always been really inspired and engaged with them. I feel like they keep me young. And so I love this like younger generation, and I want to continue to be active and stay relevant on social media so that I can affect that like high school generation, so that they know about their pelvic floors, and then they can go in and advocate to their healthcare professionals, to their partners, all of those things. So I love what you do.
I love that. I think that, like I haven't heard of a sex ed curriculum that includes information specifically about the pelvic floor. So
I don't think there is.
Yeah, I'm super interested to know like everything that you have to say about it, because it's a subject that is definitely not included in any curriculum.
Right. Which is such a shame, because so I remember, a little bit of background with me. My mom, I always joke about this because people ask, how did you get into this? Because I literally look at like vaginas, penises, rectums all day long. Like my finger was in a vagina and a rectum today. And I just like love it. It was just like fantastic. And
that's how I feel about sex ed.
Yeah.
I'm like, I talk to teenagers about sex for a living, and it's amazing.
It's like the best thing ever. And So like people are like, how did you get into this? And I just so clearly remember my mom saying to me, like, you need to look at your vagina. And if you don't know what normal looks like, no one will know what normal looks like. And I remember like trying to get in front of our mirror and like trying to see my vagina. And like it was so hard, but like figuring it out and like getting this little compact mirror and like looking at it. But then I remember being able to go into the doctor and being like, I have redness. And the doctor being like, oh, it's just probably your underwear was too tight. And I was like, no, I have been watching it for the last week. Like this redness has remained unchanged. And my mom just sitting there and being like, I believe her. And like the doctor being like, oh no, it's not a big deal. And my mom's like, no, you need to listen. So I don't. And then I went to a Catholic school and
they're not known for their.
Yeah. There, and I remember all of my classmates giggling over having to say penis and vagina. And I was just like, penis, 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 vagina, 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 like no big deal. And it was so weird to me because in my family, it wasn't like they were a sex positive family. Like in no means were my mom and dad that way, but they were it was like we were an anatomy positive. Like I wouldn't even say body positive. I wouldn't even go that far, but it was like, if you were going to use the medical anatomy terms, like my mom and dad, Roy and Terry, were all about anatomy. And so, so it's weird now being a medical professional. It's odd to me, like when I hear kids talk to their parents and say anatomical terms and the parents like freak out about it. And I just think to myself, like, how like will people understand to do, how, like I remember taking out the little pamphlet of how to put a tampon in and like studying that dang diagram and trying to figure it out. And it's just, there are so many things I think that could be alleviated through appropriate education. And in my mind, it's like, it's all anatomy. But because it has to do with our privates, suddenly it's dirty and bad. And why is that? Why is it that way? So, yeah, so I do have some pretty strong opinions on it. And, yeah.
Okay, so many things.
Yeah.
One, same. Two, my mom's a physical therapist, so that's, yeah. So totally understand the, like, anatomy part.
Yes.
When I was in college, I did the vagina monologues, and they handed out these little mirrors. They say, V-Day, the vagina monologues, explore yourself. And it's like this little...
Love it! That's so cool.
Yeah, I have like a little collection of these. They're my favorite. They're so cute.
I love it.
So yeah, and like I remember just talking about like learning how to interact with tampons. So my mom had the ones without an applicator, and I was so confused about how that could possibly work. Because
yes.
those are like advanced ones.
Yeah, that's advanced.
So that was all I saw growing up, and so I had no idea how to use them. And it wasn't until I was a senior in high school that someone taught me how to use a tampon, because I was just afraid to ask.
Yeah.
And I've definitely outgrown that. Now I'm all about asking all the questions and giving all the answers.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that if we don't grow up in an environment where asking questions is encouraged, or like it shouldn't even have to be on the young person to ask the question. It should be on the adults to show them how it's done. I mean, like, no hate to my mom who didn't teach me how to properly use a tampon. But like, like a lot of people's experience is like that. So yeah, I'm all for like using correct anatomical terms. There should not be any shame in like naming your parts. And also like if we were taught that it's not shameful, we don't have to refer to it as like kiki or hoo-ha or whatever. Then if we're having issues, then you can talk about them without that stigma, that like dark cloud of your head, like, oh, I'm not supposed to be talking about this, so I'm not going to tell anyone that I'm having these problems and I'm having redness or whatever.
Yes.
So yeah, I do think that the language that we use to talk about our bodies has so much power.
Right. Totally.
Okay, so what should young people know about pelvic floor muscles?
Yeah. So I think the biggest thing is that they should know that there are pelvic floor muscles. I think that, like, not, okay, wait, let's just like bring it back like a beat. I think it would be great if they just knew their anatomy. Like, even just, I don't know what you teach in your like education to your students, but it would be great if they actually did take a mirror and like look and like knew like this is the clitoris, or this is the urethral opening, this is the like head of my penis, and like this is the perineum. Because I can't tell you how many people I get question like, what is the perineum? Like, oh, women only have the perineum, or men only have the perineum. And I'm like, no, we all have it. And like, I'll be like, it's the space behind the scrotum. And they're like, what's the scrotum? And I'm like, your balls, like, you know. And so if they could just like know what the parts are, that would be super great. That'd be like step one.
Yeah. And that's like, I mean, so our curriculum is, it's very like tight and scripted, and it doesn't include anatomy, which is so unfortunate. But there is a part where I just like squeeze in like a little lesson, because we do teach a class on birth control. And so I feel like in order to explain what an IUD is, you really have to like show a diagram of like the internal system, so that you can see when you say, oh, it sits like in the uterus, like what does that mean? Like, does it get lost in your vagina? No. Right. Like you need to have that basic knowledge in order to build on it.
Yes.
So I do like a quick little segment where I'll like draw out like the vaginal canal, the
cervix.
Thank you. Mm-hmm. Like the uterus, the fallopian tubes, and the ovaries. And then I'll like throw in a quick thing about the clitoris, and I'm like, it looks like this, and it's actually mostly internal. And like that always blows some minds, and I love doing that.
Yes.
So yeah, I think that also like it would just talking about female pleasure, even like briefly in a classroom, would like break so much stigma, and like we have such like ingrained ideals that like that sex is pleasure for men and like happens to women. Right. And I think that just like acknowledging the existence of the clitoris and like talking about like what it actually is, what it actually looks like, would go so far.
Right. And isn't it funny that I just heard you say I have to explain about birth control, yet I'm not going over anatomy? Because like in my head, how the heck do you know how to utilize a condom if you don't know the anatomy?
Well, I mean, we do have a demonstration with Mr. Woody.
Right.
So you know, like there just automatically there's more like we are showing a penis, or a model of a penis in a classroom, but we don't do the same for vaginas,
right?
Or and it's like in between.
Right. And it's all about like repetition. Like in my mind with any of this stuff, it's about like, of course, the first time is always like, oh my gosh, this is so goofy. But if you do it 50 times, it's like, oh, it's like whatever, it's a penis, you know? And so like, that's my thing. It's like, it should just be so normalized that when I say, like to me, people will be like, oh my God, how do you see vaginas and penises all day long? And I'm like, to me, it's like a nose. Like when I see someone's face, I'm not like, oh my gosh, I am so focused on that person's nose, I'm going to remember their nose forever. No, I don't remember their nose. Like it just sort of blends into the background. It's the same thing with their like vagina or penis or rectum or whatever. So I just wish they would do that same thing for kids. And I think we don't give kids enough credit. But I also think we don't treat kids like we don't treat them with enough maturity, maybe. Because I think they might think like, oh, if they can't handle that, or it's too adult for them or whatever. And it's like, listen, they're getting this stuff from lots of places, and we might as well just get on the front end of this. So,
yeah. And give them actual facts.
Yeah. So the anatomy would be the first piece. And then from the pelvic floor standpoint, I would just love for them to know that there are muscles and to start to gain an awareness. So when I say awareness, I mean super simple. Like when you contract, like you're stopping the flow of urine or you're trying not to pass gas, which usually everyone laughs about, can you feel a squeeze and lift? Not that you're trying to do it with your butt cheeks, but in that perineum, can you feel a squeeze and lift? And then if you pretend to bear down or push down like you're trying to pass gas, can you feel your pelvic floor bear down? Like, so starting to appreciate that range of motion, because I think that's huge for boys, girls, and anyone on the spectrum in between. Because if you're placing tampons, if you're having a pelvic exam, if you struggle with constipation or incontinence, or if you're having pelvic pain with intercourse, any of those things, having just a slight bit of awareness of where is my pelvic floor in space is going to help mitigate and get rid of many of those issues. But most people are like, oh shit, sorry for the language, oh crap, this hurts. And so they're going to tighten more, but they don't even realize they're doing it. So I will see people who are younger, who are in high school or just after high school, and they'll say, every single pelvic exam I've had was painful, or every time I've used a tampon, it was painful. And I didn't say anything, or my doctor said, keep pushing through it. Or I just kept having sex and it was painful. And it's like, if you would have just and all it was, and I can see is as soon as I go to touch their pelvic floors, as soon as I do something, they start to tighten. And it's like, literally, we have to take 2 or 3 physical therapy sessions of just verbally telling them, hey, you're tightening. Can you relax? And as soon as they gain that awareness, bam, we're done. And it was like literally that simple. But they just keep tightening because they think because they don't have awareness of that area because they haven't been looking at it. They don't know what's down there. They don't know the anatomical stuff that's happening. So if we could address it in high school, in grade school, by just getting some awareness, we would avoid so many problems.
So the squeezing and lifting and releasing and bearing down, are those the same thing as Kegels? Are they akin to Kegels?
Yes. So Kegels, so Dr. Kegel is the guy that discovered the pelvic floor muscles. And then he just, Kegling is just, of course. Kegling is just just the word for pelvic floor contraction. So, it's just tightening. So I think it's kind of funny because I remember growing up, again, reading in all of the magazines, make sure your pelvic floor muscles are strong. Try to stop the flow of urine when you're sitting on the toilet. Don't really do that. That's actually a bad idea because it can give you a urinary tract infection. But I tell people, think about it as if you're trying to stop the flow of urine, or I'll also tell them, you're in an elevator and you don't want to pass gas. And then everyone is like, oh yeah. Okay, I know, that's that tightening. So just working on that. And then the opposite is that bearing down or straining. That's a voluntary voluntary relaxation. And then the other version, an involuntary relaxation, is just if you do diaphragmatic breathing. So just relaxed breathing. And you'll feel, as you gain more awareness, you'll feel that descent and relaxation. So it's really, really interesting because so many people, of course, I live it every day, but so many people don't really think about their pelvic floor until it gives them a problem. So if we just took a little bit of time to educate people when they're young about it, we educate about blood pressure, we educate about healthy eating, we want to educate about sex education, all of this stuff. It really wouldn't take that long to add it in. It's just literally writing it in as a part of an already existing curriculum. So why isn't it already in there? Well, because then we would have to talk about, oh God, vaginas and penises. Oh,
yeah. So is that like, how is it? How do the pelvic floor muscles function differently, or do they function differently in people with penises versus people with vaginas?
So the one difference between penis and vagina is with the anatomy for someone with a vagina is we have this thing called a urogenital hiatus. And all that is just a split in the muscles to allow for that vaginal canal. So that puts that type of pelvic floor at a slight disadvantage for later in life to have a little bit more that type of pelvic floor can be more predisposed to like that prolapse that I was talking about, or if they've had some type of injury, maybe because they've delivered a kiddo or something like that, they can tend to have more urinary incontinence. But from a function standpoint, the muscles all function the same. And so that's one of the things that I really love about the pelvic floor is that it's like, listen, it doesn't matter what anatomy you were born with. It all works the same. And there's all of that function there.
All right. I never thought, because like when you talk about Kegels, it's always like, oh, it's to like tighten your vagina or something.
Yes.
You don't ever think about it being applied to anyone with a penis.
Right.
So I like the fact that it's sort of like universally applicable.
Yes, totally.
That's cool.
Yeah.
All right. So let's go through some of the comments.
Yeah.
My elder said we should work out our uterus the way we work out our bodies.
There we go.
Okay. African/indigenous people were on pelvic floor awareness for thousands of years.
Oh, I can totally believe it. I mean, I've listened to so many podcasts. I was listening to this one podcast. It probably had to be like a year and a half ago, and I cannot remember the name of it for the life of me. A friend of mine sent it to me, and they were talking about if you went into some of these different like indigenous cultures and you looked at where women gave birth, they would have poles that were like dug into the ground so women could hold on to the pole. Or like if they had like different huts, they would have ropes that kind of hung from the ceiling so they could hold on to these ropes, and they would have all of these contraptions kind of set up so that they could support themselves in different birthing postures. And then I actually just read this book, which this is really fascinating. I read it in high school. It's called The Red Tent. And it talks about how women passed down their oral tradition by going into this tent every time they had their period, and how basically they would go into this tent when they had their period and when they were delivering kids. And it was just really, really powerful. And it talked, it it was through the story of this girl, and then as she went into kind of womanhood and on. And I thought it was so cool and interesting how that community aspect. So, I mean, I think that's so incredible. And I think that we really could take a lot from those cultures and apply that more to today. Like, why is it that was so rich in tradition and something that wasn't shameful then, but it's filled with so much shame now, you know, and really learn from those cultures about how could we educate and carry that on in a more holistic and positive manner.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really important to talk about like the ways in which knowledge from Black and Indigenous cultures have been appropriated by like the largely white, largely male medical community and like rebranded as discovery.
Yeah.
Like last week, I was talking to my guest Cindy from Howl of the Womb, and she taught me that like the technology for birth control came from like Indigenous women. I think it was in Mexico. How they used like the yam root as like it had like an enzyme that prevented pregnancy, and like that was the basis for the birth control pill. And it's like nobody talks about that.
Right.
Like, it
totally.
wasn't white men who discovered it first.
Right.
I think that a lot of the narratives around like any medical anything, especially in regards to like the bodies of people with vaginas.
Yes.
The narrative is, oh, it was discovered by a white man, but like
right.
that's not the case, and
right.
we should give credit where credit's due, and not where like the knowledge was appropriated.
Right. Totally. And also I think it's interesting, like even as I was talking about that, and as you and I were talking earlier in the conversation, it's like, why is it in those cultures, and like that individual was saying, that it was family members that were giving family members, the community, all of that was passing on this information. Yet I'll tell my friends or say to my friends, like, at what age are you going to start talking to your kids about their body? And actually, I had a friend, she has an 11-year-old daughter. The 11-year-old daughter was stealing her laptop and reading my blog, lauramyhofer.com. Every week, my blog, I have 47 blogs, and that little girl has read every single solitary blog that I have written. Because she has wanted to know more about her body, and she went to my blog, didn't say anything to me, but went to my blog and did it because she knows that the other computers and iPads in the house have parent controls, but knows that the mom's laptop doesn't. And I'm like, and I said, well, have you talked to her about her body? And like, have you talked about this? And have you talked about that? And I'm like, if you don't feel comfortable talking to her, like, I'm fine talking to her, you know, but then, and I'm just like, she's 11, and she's like, don't you think that's too early? And I'm like, no, you know? So anyway, I just think it's just fascinating, but it's like, what, like, it's like, I think we should ask these cultures, like, clearly you're so much more comfortable talking about it. Clearly you were killing it. Like, please show me your ways, you know?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, okay. So some more comments. We used to build our pelvic floors to prevent rape.
Wow.
It's important when we say narratives like Dr. Kegel discovered the pelvic floor, because that erases our medicine/knowledge/history. Absolutely. And yes, my 5-year-old son knows more about sex, bodies, birth than most grown men. Love it. Yeah, I think it's equally important for everyone to know everything about everyone's bodies, because
right.
there's no point in keeping it secret.
Right.
It's literally life-saving information.
Right.
So.
And I know one of the things that you had messaged with me earlier was about getting access to physical therapy. So one of my things that I think is kind of fascinating about physical therapy, and I think different about me than maybe some of my colleagues, is I am willing to do pelvic floor treatment and assessment on people that are younger. So many people say, if the patient or client is under 18, they will not do an internal or external pelvic floor muscle examination. So let me give a little bit of background. And I think that this is really important, actually, especially after like the whole crazy Larry Nassar, US gymnastics kind of insaneness.
Yes.
So as I was saying, the pelvic floor function, so there's 26 muscles. They attach, actually, let me grab my pelvic model.
Yes, love it.
Yeah, because I think that will be better. Yeah. I love anatomy. So, okay, so as I said, so you can do penis, you can do vagina. The pelvic model that I have and that I like is one that shows a vagina. So the pelvic floor is 26 muscles. They attach behind the front of our pubic bone, and then they run like a sling or a hammock and attach at our tailbone here. Okay. These 26 muscles, even though they look like a glommed on sheet of like muscles, they're actually like a 3D sort of spider web. And so layer 1 is at my first knuckle, layer 2 is at my second knuckle, and layer 3 is at my third knuckle. So when I go to do a pelvic floor assessment and I'm going into the vaginal canal, layer 1 is here, layer 2 is at my second finger, and then layer 3, I have my finger all the way inserted and I'm going around the pelvic bowl. So when we have people so I don't understand why people think there should be a magic cutoff of once you're 18, you suddenly then, oh, now I can do an internal assessment, because there are certainly people who are 18 who I wouldn't do an internal assessment on because maybe they haven't been sexually active. Maybe that's not their goal. Maybe they've never even used a tampon and it just wouldn't be appropriate. So 18 is not some magic number. So then there are some physical therapists who say they will not do a internal pelvic muscle assessment unless a doctor has done an internal pelvic muscle assessment. I'm on the fence about this. I think that the person should be having a really big conversation with the parent, hopefully, and the patient and the doctor. So things that would indicate doing a pelvic floor muscle assessment is if the person is experiencing like urinary incontinence, constipation, pelvic pain, like difficulty inserting tampons or removing tampons, things like that. And so I oftentimes will have patients that come in who are having I've had a lot who have pelvic pain, urinary incontinence. This is people, again, anywhere on the spectrum, but they have, as far as male or female, but they'll have penis or vagina, doesn't matter. They'll have like constipation, pelvic pain, urinary incontinence. And generally that means these pelvic floor muscles are tight and they're being held, and we need to work on relaxing them. Well, because they're having urinary incontinence, many doctors will say, well, just tighten. You need to work on tightening. And that makes their pain worse. So they come into me and they've never had a sexual partner. And so then most of my colleagues would say, you shouldn't do an internal assessment on them. So this is where it's really important to have these open communications with the patient, with the parent, with the doctor or the nurse practitioner, the PA, who's ever kind of overseeing everything, to explain and to really spend time educating. These are the pelvic floor muscles. This is what they do. This is what they involve. This is how we can assess them. So I always explain, I can assess your muscles with your clothes on by putting my forearm across your sits bones like this and having you breathe. And I can do it over your clothes and pushing on the muscles like this. I can just look at the muscles with you unclothed. I can push on the muscles with you unclothed, and we can do this in steps. But again, when you talk about, like you were saying, your access issue, if you have a parent that is unwilling to talk about penis and vagina, if you have a parent who is unwilling to talk about urinary incontinence, or maybe a parent, I've had parents who don't believe in like tampons or don't believe in different things, like, how does that child then get care? So I was trying to look up some numbers on healthcare disparities and access and all of that. And I feel like I know there is a huge gap of research, and I don't know if it would ever even be able, maybe with the electronic medical records, it will be able to one day be done. But I feel like parents are a huge stopgap for what can and cannot happen for kids, because one, you need kind of a parent who's involved, but they can't be too overly involved and too much of a helicopter parent, because like I've had some parents where I'm like, they very much need to be able to have time to do these stretches and do this. And the parent's like, no, they need to strengthen. And I'm like, no, they need to do restorative, relaxing yoga, and then so there has to be, and then if you have parents that don't care, then the kids can't get, care or whatever. So that was, I wanted to just kind of address that from a pelvic floor standpoint. I think there's a huge access issue for pediatric patients. And I think that, and that's meaning anyone under 18. And I think that the whole Larry Nassar thing just really, it was horrible, absolutely horrible. And I think made it worse because pelvic floor therapists potentially got a bad rap. And I think that you do have to be very careful who you go to with your child when you're getting that kind of care. You have to do your research and really go to some, if it were me, I would rather drive 4 hours and go to someone who's seeing 100% pelvic floor patients all the time, than go to someone that's only seeing them 10 or 20% of the time. So
that makes sense. Yeah, you want someone who's professional.
Yeah. So I think that's another reason why I think starting this education young, and I saw a question come in about what should a 4-year-old or younger know about body parts and functions. And I'm sure you can answer this even better as a health educator. But my thing is just starting to normalize those parts, and using the correct terminology so that it's never something that is like scary or shameful. And I kind of have this idea brewing in the back of my head that I would love to do a workshop to train parents, like teach the teacher, train parents how and when and what to train their kids or to teach their kids, because I think that parents just are passing down whatever their parents did. So I know my mom's parents didn't do so great. So she wanted to do better. So she did, the mirror thing, which was amazing. But then I talked to a lot of my friends and they were like, oh my God, no, Laura, I was always the weird friend that was like, let's talk about all this stuff. And now look at what I'm doing for a living, so, so I think that, if we could just have these conversations now and think of the power that if we started with a 4-year-old, teaching those words, if that same 4-year-old then was in this gymnastics situation and had the vocabulary and didn't have the shame around their body to then go to their parent or go to a trusted healthcare teacher to say, this gymnastics medical provider is touching me in a way that I don't think is right, we would have been able to address that so much earlier. But because it is so wrapped in shame and because we don't talk about these things, then that is where bad stuff happens. And so, and that's where pelvic dysfunction happens, and it just doesn't need to be that way. So, yeah.
So can pelvic dysfunction be a result of trauma?
Yes. Yep. So the pelvic floor is has about 80% slow twitch muscles. So think like your marathon runners, and 20% fast twitch muscles. It's very much tied into our fight or flight like area of our body, which is obviously really important because like that one individual was saying earlier, that they were taught to strengthen their pelvic floor as a way to avoid being raped. It is very much ingrained. If we're going to be attacked, we want to tighten our pelvic floor so it can help support our hips and back and help keep us continent so we can run. And so if you were assaulted in any way, or if you have been, your pelvic floor has been traumatized. So some people actually have suffered injuries and actual trauma, but those muscles will have been forcibly stretched, forcibly bumped into. I know that's like, it sounds like not a great, like, of course it happened much worse than that. But if you think like I, ran into the wall the other day, into a corner, into my tricep. And then I went to Orange Theory and I was trying to work out, and my tricep has just been killing me because I ran into a corner. The same thing is true with your pelvic floor. So if you're here, your pelvic floor is hurting you because it's been forcibly run into, and then you've got, okay, I know what happened to me. It's going to create this guarding and protecting, and then that's where we get that tension, and then that tension keeps going. Then we get constipation, which drives more tension, which then shortens the muscle, and then, you keep going, and then you end up, seeing me in 20 years. And we have to work on gently stretching and gently kind of peeling back those layers slowly but surely. So yeah, it's some pretty powerful stuff.
That's so interesting that those muscles are part of like a fight or flight response. I never would have like made that.
Yes. Definitely sign up for my newsletter because there's lots of good information that comes out. And yeah, it is pretty incredible. So even with kids, with how stressed that they are, like, and with this modern society of all the stuff is coming at us and all of the stuff with the pandemic, I think we're going to see a rise. Of course, we're going to see a rise in mental health stuff, but I also have been seeing a rise in pelvic floor stuff because people are just holding this tension all day long and they just like don't know what to do with it. And so it goes to our pelvic floor because our pelvic floor and our diaphragm run parallel to each other as well. So if we're not breathing well and we're stressed, then our pelvic floor tightens too.
Yeah, my friend just texted me that this is super interesting. So.
We can always do another talk. I love IG Live.
I still have more questions. Okay.
Yeah.
So we talked about a little bit of the reasons behind pain during sex for people with vaginas. What about pain during sex for people with penises?
So same concept. So when you have an erection, you're going to have increased blood flow to those muscles. So with increased blood flow, those muscles are going to have to like engorge, but then also there are two very important muscles that have to tighten and clamp down to hold the blood flow into the penis. And so with that engorgement, that's going to cause muscle stretching. So think of like if you went to go touch your toes, I'm highly inflexible. And so I have a hard time touching my toes. So imagine if someone came up behind me and then pushed down on my back really aggressively. Right. That's the same thing. Yeah. So that's what happens. So when someone has pain with intercourse, whether you have a penis or a vagina, it's that blood flow going to that area and that engorgement, that aggressive stretching does not feel good. Then follow it up with, here we have these muscles aggressively contracting to hold that blood flow in. Same thing. If I get a Charlie horse in my calf, the last thing I want to do is start doing a bunch of like heel raises. I want to stretch it out. So same concept there. Those muscles just do not like that super stretch and they don't like that super contraction. So it kind of gives us, it's like you're having like a Charlie horse or an aggressive stretch sensation right in that pelvic floor. So people will say like, oh, it feels like I'm got stabbed or I'm sitting on a golf ball, or like those are the things that will get expressed.
So is the pain with erection or specifically with intercourse or outercourse?
So it can happen with all of the things. So it can happen with arousal. So just as the blood flow is going there, it can happen with erection, with orgasm, or then following orgasm in that refractory period when things are kind of relaxing down. All of those things can happen. Same with vulvas. With people with vulvas, I would say it happens more so with the penetration, because with penetration, we're bumping into a tight muscle. So if you find a knot in your neck and then you repeatedly push on the knot, that's essentially a penis or a dildo or a vibrator repeatedly pushing into a knot in your neck. That's what's happening with those pelvic floor muscles. Mm-hmm.
Got it. And so does this, like, so we talked a little bit about, you know, like the structure anatomically. Does it vary for people who are intersex or people like who have, you know,
undergone like genital reconstruction surgery? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, yes, it does. So with genital reconstruction surgery, they are, when you're transitioning, when you're having the surgery and you're going male to female, they actually have to remove some muscles, and then they're taking like the head of the penis and they're making that the clitoris. So they're restructuring things. When you are going and you're having the genital reconstruction from a vulva to a penis, that is usually it's typically a 2-part, but can be a 3-part surgery. It's quite extensive. And if you're doing like the full phalloplasty, there's different stages for that as well. And that has some different nuances to it. And that does change things as well. The good thing with that is there are supportive, affirming providers out there. There are not a ton of people out there that know a lot about it, but there are a lot of people who really want to learn, and there are some great courses out there. So reaching out for help is always the best, and we have so many ideas for how to help people get to the sexual functioning that they want.
Amazing. Yeah. I mean, I've never really thought about like what exactly goes into that kind of surgery and like how to reconstruct
right
the whole area, because as you said, there are lots and lots of muscles.
Right.
So do people lose functioning of
yes.
of those muscles after that kind of
surgery?
They can.
Yep.
Surgery is very intense.
It can be. Yeah, it can be. It's a really intense surgery. So the surgery for vaginoplasty is anywhere between like 3 to 5 hours, depending on the surgeon. And then for the phalloplasty, that's like around 8 to 9 hours for the surgery for like the full-fledged, the first stage. That's just the first stage. So it's pretty extensive. So I think the interesting thing is not even the surgeons really think that about the piece of like, oh, this muscle functioning. So I've worked really closely with a lot of the surgeons, and they're like, we just gave them a packet and then they just do what's in the packet. And I was like, excuse me, why don't I cut off your arm, invert it into your body, and I'll just give you a packet and then see how you figure it out. And they were like, and I was like, yeah. I was like, how do you feel about that? And like, they were like, I sometimes am come across very bubbly, but at the same time with my patients and clients, I'm like kind of like a mama bear, like don't
You're
mess
their
with me.
advocate.
Yeah. And so I like was like dead serious. And like one of the surgeons asked me like, oh, so what, do you just like deal with people after they have like a baby or something? And he said, I like turned and looked at him with such disdain and like the evilest eye ever, and like looked at him like he was scum. And he's like, I never felt so small in my life. And I was like, well, who would say that? Like, and he goes, and then you said the comment about cutting off my arm and sticking it in my body and just giving me a pamphlet. And I was like, well, so yeah. But as an educator, you get that, right? Like so many people just think like they just dismiss, I think, education in general, right? We're seeing that with the whole pandemic and teachers. Like we need people like that teach things. So yes. Mm-hmm.
Yes, we do. In short,
Yeah.
we need people that teach things.
Yes.
Love it. That's incredible that you work so closely with surgeons. I mean,
Yes.
it makes sense. I just didn't, haven't thought about like that. Like it's, takes a village.
Yes.
To build someone. That's so much to think about.
Yes.
Okay, so it's 4:00.
Yes.
I feel like we've covered a lot.
We have.
So if there are any more questions that you have, I'm going to give people a minute to ask any other questions. If we get cut off, you can always DM me or DM Laura. Thank you so much for being here. This was incredible. So amazing. So much knowledge. I loved it.
Yes, definitely. I for sure want to stay in contact and continue to pick your brain. And of course, I sent out, and maybe you can share with your audience, the clitoris stickers.
Yes, they are at the link in our bio.
Oh, perfect. So make sure you explain. Stickers. So I'll explain it really quick. So I shared these amazing clitorises. So it's the actual anatomy, like you were saying, of the clitoris, which is much more robust than what people typically think. And they're saying funny sayings like, it's not all about my head, and all of those different things. And so I think that they're great and amazing. And you can also follow me on Clitoris Collective, which is just more of a sex positive account.
Love it. Yeah. Go get your clitoris stickers. I'll definitely get some.
Yes, I can send you some for sure.
Okay, so we had one last question. What should a 4-year-old know about body parts and functions? So I teach high schoolers, so that's children of that age are not my expertise. 4-year-old is like, what's that, kindergarten?
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's fairly young. I would like name the body parts for what they are. Ooh, Instagram's giving us the 2-minute warning. I would like name the body parts and say, they're for peeing, for pooping, and for making babies.
Yeah.
And leave it at that.
Yeah, and
that would be
I think
my advice, but it's not my area of expertise. So.
What I have read about and learned is that if they ask, you tell them, and you don't give them more information than what they ask. So if they ask about, if they point at dad or mom or whatever, they ask where babies come from, you like just basically answer the question that they ask and then you move on. Like usually as adults, we make it much more difficult. But if they say like, well, where do babies come from? You can say, well, they like come from mom's belly, you know, they're like you were in mom's belly. And then, okay, well, how did they get there? And then you can build on that. But oftentimes they get bored and will like kind of
Go to something else.
Yeah, go on to something else. And so it's been funny hearing people try to elaborate and then the kids just like want to go play. So just kind of ask and tell what they're doing and then using the anatomical terms straight away.
Great advice. All
Yeah.
right. We are about to get cut off, so I'm gonna let you go. Thank you again
Bye.
for everything, and we'll be in touch.
See you. If you want to get the full rundown on the pelvic floor, click my top playlist that covers all things pelvic floor. I'll see you over there.